Good morning. We offer you an imperfect welcome. We may forget your name. We ask again because we really want to know. We offer hello and restrooms downstairs with hopes that you will be more comfortable. We have a lot to share, and we are glad you're here. We offer an imperfect welcome, but we are really glad you're here.
Welcome. Welcome to everyone who's joining us here in the sanctuary or over our live stream. Whether you're here for the first time or the manyth time, my name's Mitch Pivor. I am one of the team of worship associates who have the honor of working with our settled minister, Reverend Ellen Quadras, and our director of Lifespan Ministry, Kirsten Hunter, who is now on sabbatical, and the rest of our wonderful staff, some of whom we'll see and others who are behind the scenes. The worship service today is being led by Ken Schoman. Ken has attended services here at South Church for quite a few years, and he's currently the convener of the men's breakfast group. Ken will be sharing his insights on this month's theme of story. Helping with service today is Susan Adams, who will serenade us with us on the piano, Ben Abbott managing tech and sound so we can hear and see, and Jen Leyden, congressional administrator, does a lot of everything to keep us together, and also will be sharing her beautiful singing with us, accompanying the hymns. Jen Del Deo, Barry, as we call her, Jen B, Director of Children and Family Ministry, will be offering the Time for All Ages with her wonderful, insightful stories. After Time for All Ages, the children are invited to go downstairs and explore our monthly theme together. Parents, please join them on the way down to sign them in if you haven't already. After the service, all are invited downstairs for coffee, snacks, and conversation. Thanks to the kitchen ministry and the people who are helping today make this happen, and thanks to the ushers and the greeters. There are large print hymnals and listening devices in the back, and usher can help you with either one. Please silence your cell phones if you have one. Let's remember, South Church stands on the traditional ancestral lands of the Abenaki and the Pennacock peoples. We honor the enduring connection of these indigenous communities to this region. We respect the resilience of their cultures and their traditions. And now for some announcements. Jen Biden will be doing that.
Good morning, everybody. Valerie's going to make an announcement too. Just a couple of things to lift up. This coming Saturday is the People's March, which will be happening in unison with People's Marches all around the country. That will be here from 1:30 to 3 on Saturday. There will be indoor and outdoor programming, so make sure that you dress warm. After the People's March, Jen Deldeo Barry will be hosting Families Together, which is kind of a free date night for parents. So if you are interested in signing your kiddo up, you need to get in touch with Jen before Thursday so that we can get your name on the list. Her info is in the order of service. Jen is also offering this summer the Roots Summer Program, which will be held August 11th through 15th for children ages 5 through 12. And then junior counselors in training, 12 to 17, I think. You can find more information with the QR code in your order of service or on the RE website. And one final kind of sad announcement. You may have seen in our most recent newsletter that Christine Sawyer, my beloved finance administrator, is headed south in this late spring. So we are going to be looking for a new finance administrator. So if you have anybody that you know of, or you yourself, that has bookkeeping or finance experience and is looking for a job, you can find some information on our Facebook page, or you can also touch base with Reverend Ellen today at the end of service, who has copies of the job announcement with her. And Valerie?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm on 2 committees this time of the year, and the first one that I want to invite each of you is to come, and I wrote a little thing. We'll be celebrating the life, legacy, and lessons of Dr. Martin Luther King. So let us ground ourselves in commitment to active nonviolence, the revolutionary power of love, and the beloved building of our beloved community. And it's also Inauguration Day, so it's a great place to land. And I've been working on this committee for many years, and I always want to see the House filled. Why? Because we were the last state in the United States to vote on Martin Luther King being a federal holiday. So please come and show your commitment and love for this beloved community. And I will be downstairs for information for the Seacoast People's March and the Martin Luther King event. Thank you so much.
And the Martin Luther King event is fantastic. We've done it a few years in a row. There's great performers, there's pancake breakfast, everything is awesome. So be here on Monday if you can. I am wearing many hats today, aren't I? Sweet the rains do fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass.
As we light our chalice today, we invite people watching at home to light a candle or chalice of their own. We light this chalice today with these words by Adrienne Marie Brown. Storytelling is a way to give someone an experience they haven't had yet, or maybe didn't even know was possible. Now, please rise and join us if you can, if you're able and willing, in reciting our mission statement printed in the order of service. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community. I love listening to stories. I especially love hearing stories from people I know, the story of their lives and families and prior generations. I rather listen to others than speaking about my own story. For telling my own family story is a story about family, not speaking about a past that is painful to tell. My grandparents were Jewish immigrants from Poland. My parents were first generation born here. Both grandparents came to this country after World War I in the 1920s, fleeing the devastation the anti-Semitism and killing that was prevalent. They came, as most immigrants, with hope for opportunity and a safer place to live. My father's side, my paternal grandparents' family story was known and talked about. The Polish town and family members, all documented and written. My father was the youngest of 9. All parents, sisters, and brothers made it here. My mother's side, different story. My maternal grandmother's story was not talked about. My mother was one child. The only thing I knew growing up as a child is my grandmother had no other family who immigrated. The story of the old country and family avoided, a common occurrence for many families at the time, for it was too painful for family to speak about all the family who was lost in the genocide of World War II, the 6 million. The only story I knew of my grandmother growing up was her story while living here in the U.S. A wonderful story of making her own way. She came at the age of 18. In the 1920s, she taught herself to speak English, to drive a car when immigrant women of that era did not. She was a gifted seamstress working in the sweat factories in New York City, but on the side, using her talents, tailoring dresses and building dresses for others. I still remember the roaring sound of the 1930s factory Singer sewing machine in her home as she performed her magic. She was also a businesswoman who owned and ran a summer bungalow colony in the Catskill Mountains of New York. Bungalows are summer cottages. She could build a cottage, roof it, and plumb it. And she was always available for a helping hand to others. She was loved by many. As it's said in Yiddish, she was described as a real mensch, one of the best compliments one can receive. It was not until I was almost 30 years old, after years of asking, I finally got my grandmother, who was well into her 80s, to tell me her story, the story of the old country, her story of her family. She started crying, and through her tears said to me, she was the second oldest of 5. She was the only one in her family who survived. And she told me through her tears the family had saved enough money to book passage to the U.S. for one. The eldest sister was chosen. Plan was for her to settle in the U.S. and then help others come. The day her eldest sister was supposed to leave, she was sick with a fever and could not go. So instead, my grandmother, the second oldest, was sent immediately, taking her place. She never saw her family again. None of the others able to get out, and when the letters stopped coming after the Holocaust, she knew they were gone. And then she looked at me through her tears and said, why did she survive while others did not? But then with a smile, through her tears, with a hand over her heart, said to me, you are a blessing in my life and brings me smiles. And I have had a life with many blessings and smiles. And then pointed to a saying on the wall that read, measure your life by smiles, not by tears. And I remember this moment like it was yesterday, despite it being over 40 years ago. And so I carry this family story forward like a gift that keeps giving, telling the story of survival and loss and blessings of life through both my tears and smiles. And I think about all the other families who lose loved ones in wars that go on and on, such as the Middle East for over 2,000 years, and appreciate the power of family story, to remember those who are with us and those who are gone, and how retelling their stories helps us to hold us together, remembering our past, giving meaning, and helping us to hope and live for the future. May it so. May it be so. Now please rise in body or spirit to join together to sing hymn number 7, The Leaf Unfurling.
The leaf unfurling in the April air, the newborn child, the loving parent. these constant common miracles we share. Alleluia, alleluia. All life is one, a single branching tree, all paid a part of human misery, all happiness a gift to you and me. Alleluia, alleluia. Self bells for joy and sorrow ring. No one can know what the next hour will bring. We cry, we laugh, we mourn, and still we sing. Alleluia, alleluia.
If there is anyone, kids or adults, who would like to hear a story in a cozier, closer space, then come on up here. Come right into this magical space. A lot of years ago, I got a job in an outdoor program where there was a very strong culture around storytelling, and that was going to be a part of my job. And I was really nervous about that because I didn't have any stories, and I didn't know how to tell fun stories. And so that was bothering me. And I had a dear friend and mentor who also worked there. And I told them how I was not sure how I was going to navigate this part of this new job. And they said, everybody has stories. Everybody has millions of stories. And if you don't like how your stories sound, you need to decide how you want your stories to be heard. And that was a big moment for me because they were right. And I want to share an example with you. And then I'll invite you after today to go out into the world and practice your storytelling because you have a million stories too. So, if I'm going to tell a story about my morning so far, I could say a woman woke up and she had some coffee and she brushed her teeth and she went to church. And that's a story. That's a full story right there. It might not be very interesting or exciting, but it's a story. And I could choose to tell it that way. And doing that, I might not feel super interested or excited about my own story, right? But if I think of a different way to tell it, one other option for that story could be, there was a woman who woke up on her 18,250th day of her life. And she moved her achy body because she was this close to being a half a century old. And her body was hurting and she used all her strength to get out of her bed. She made her way all the way to the coffee pot. And she poured and poured and poured the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. She drank it and sat enjoying that cup of coffee. And then just when she looked at the clock and realized that she was running late, that's when the caffeine kicked in and she sprung up, not a single pain in her body, and made her way into church right at the perfect time. Same story. Still true, and just told a different way. And then one other way, same Same scenario I could tell many other ways. But the one that I'm choosing to identify with today is, as the sun raised its fiery head above the horizon, its rays shot into the face of a majestic sleeping creature. She opened her eyes, and she found some magic beans that had come from the other side of the world. She ground them and made a delectable elixir, all powerful, that she put into her body. And as she felt the power of this elixir coursing through her veins, she polished her gleaming fangs and went out into the world to seek adventure. All of these stories are true about today. And the way I choose to tell my story affects how I feel about my story, my life, myself, right? So if I'm like, yeah, I just got up and went to work, whatever, I'm not going to feel as excited about my own life. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to lie about my life, but the way that I name the beauty, sometimes even the sad parts, sometimes it's important that I name the sad parts, but the way that I tell my story affects me and it affects you. And so I invite you to try this out. Everybody, take little tiny snippets of stories and think of how you want them to be told and tell them to people. So, for example, if you come home from school and someone asks you, how was your day? Don't say good. Tell the story a different way. So now, let's go downstairs and do all kinds of storytelling.
Each week at the Offertory, we give as we are able to support South Church. During the month, our collection will be shared with the Joan G. Lovering Health Center. Lovering Health is dedicated to providing confidential, comprehensive, and accurate sexual and reproductive health information and services to all in a supportive environment. It is their passion to honor, respect, and advocate for the right of everyone to maintain freedom and choices regarding their own sexual and reproductive health. You can learn more at their website found in the order of service. May the offering begin.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. We're all gathered here and those far away. For this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
My mother was a devout Catholic, and she expected her kids to keep that faith. Naturally, she was disturbed that her eldest, me, followed a different religious path. Mom did her best to understand why I chose Unitarian Universalism. She struggled, however, because Unitarian Universalism lacks the Christian dogma that she knew so well. She just couldn't grasp, as David Lehrer once wrote, an honest spiritual quest without supernatural underpinnings. She tried to understand by asking basic questions like, do you even believe in God? No simple answer for that one. More than once, when we talked, she might refer to UUs as you people. Later, she was convinced that Star Island, where Sarah and I have often gone for vacation, was really an offshore cult. I was sorry she felt that way, but I understood and was able to listen with sympathy and a bit of humor. Such was our conversation, which is now over because she is gone. So here I sit, quietly in the attic, going through the photos and papers she left behind. In one box, I discover the program for her college graduation. At Simmons in Boston in 1940, the day before commencement, there was a church service for the senior class. The baccalaureate sermon that year was delivered by the Reverend Frederick May Elliott. What's so special about that? He was then president of the American Unitarian Association. And that little item was printed in the program. The next day, their graduation ceremony opened, as is commonly done, with a prayer. That invocation was given by the Reverend Dana McLean Greeley. A church minister at the time, he later followed in Elliott's footsteps. He became president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Incredible. Several years ago, if we knew about Mom's graduation, that might have softened her disdain for you people. As it is, I think Mom retained a special kind of faith. She believed that all of her kids, despite their shortcomings, would be fine, even if we strayed from the flock. As we gather together this morning, we are a part of each other's stories. In joy and sorrow, in celebration and regret, we do not walk alone. There is comfort and power in standing together at these moments. As we light candles this morning, please allow Mitch and me to light the first ones. Sorry. And although we light candles silently, please grant me an exception. I am lighting a candle as a prayer for my daughter. She is one of several family members and close friends of this congregation who live in Los Angeles. Mitch is lighting a candle to express our thoughts for the thousands of people who are victims of this unthinkable disaster. If you wish also to light a candle for a joy or a concern, please come forward and quietly light a candle. few years ago, a close friend who lives in Norway, Europe, gave me a book. It was a complete history of Norway in English, almost 500 pages. The history starts late in the 9th century, about 870 AD. Okay, so why would the history of Norway start in 870? About then, Othar, the Norwegian chieftain, visited King Alfred in England. Othar told Alfred of his homeland and of his travels. The king had a scribe write down the story of this visit in Old English. This written document is the first known account of Norway and the Norwegians. It is when they step onto the historical stage. Of course, people lived in Norway long before Othar. 12,000 years ago, when the ice retreated from the glaciers after the last ice age, hunters and fisher folk settled along the coast. This we know from archaeology. Our own region is like that. Around the Piscataqua River, people have lived here for thousands of years. We acknowledge the first people every Sunday. But many of our historical narratives start a mere 400 years ago. Here, prehistory ends about 1600 with the arrival of Europeans. Why is that? One reason is that John Smith, who landed on the Isles of Shoals, wrote letters back to England. He described this region in glowing terms as a land of beauty and bounty. Maybe that's when travel agents were invented. Like Norway, we have a transition from prehistory to history. Prehistory is not about dinosaurs and cave dwellers. For Norway, prehistory ended in 870. A story in writing is the beginning of what we call history. In fact, the Oxford Dictionary defines prehistory as the period of time before written records. Around the world, there is no single date for the transition from prehistory to history. It varies by culture and location. Ordinary folks, like you and me, who are neither chieftains nor kings, also have a history. Anyone who has done genealogy can attest to that. When parents and grandparents are gone, their unwritten stories may disappear into prehistory. It can be stories in writing that we want. When I was young, in my family, there was no tribal lore. My father, a World War II vet, didn't want to talk about ancestry. Italian Americans, Irish Americans, even African Americans, he said, no, we're all Americans, not hyphen Americans. And so that ended the discussion. At some point, it was said that my paternal great-grandfather, named George, immigrated to the United States from Copenhagen, Denmark. But that one sentence was the whole story. There was nothing more to be said about him, either before or after he came to the United States. Later in 1993, Sarah and I planned to visit Denmark on a trip to Europe. By then, both my father and grandfather were gone. Since we would be in Copenhagen anyway, I decided to find out where and when my great-grandfather, George, was born. One morning, I went to the Danish National Archives. The man at the front desk said, "Can I help you?" "I think my great-grandfather was from Copenhagen," I said. "Can I look for him?" "What was his name?" "Schoman." "That doesn't sound very Danish to me," he said. "Do you know anything else about him?" "Not much, I'm afraid." "Very well, follow me." He led me on a short walk through a doorway into a wide, well-lit room. Here you are. As he turned to leave, he might have muttered, "Stupid American." I was alone in a room that was shallow and wide. One long wall was full of small brown drawers. From end to end, 1,000 of them stacked head high. Each drawer was about 5 inches square, with a pull tab and a label. I found one that said Copenhagen in the late 1800s, so I opened it. The drawer was filled with a dozen small boxes lined up inside. Each box held a roll of microfilm with photos of document pages, hundreds of pages on each roll. There was no index, and it was all in Danish. Stupid American. After that fiasco, the search for my great-grandfather became a hobby for me. I kept looking in archives and libraries here in the United States. I learned a lot about George after he arrived. I found where he lived, where he worked, who he married, when he died, and more about his children. But I still did not know where he came from. My original question, where was George born, still had no answer. Despite the advent of internet databases, the Danish records were inaccessible. So I gave up. I quit looking in 2014. About 10 years later, I was sitting idly in the Portsmouth Public Library. They have a subscription to Ancestry.com. On a whim, I logged in just to see if anything had changed. Indeed, it had. Within minutes, I found George. Yes, indeed, he was born in Copenhagen. When he was 21, he emigrated alone to the US. In the database, I also found his father and mother, my great-great-grandparents. They were not from Germany, not from Denmark, however. They lived in Copenhagen for only a few years. They moved there from a very small town in northern Germany. It was so small, the name of the town was Einhaus. In English, the name of the town is One House. There's more to the genealogy, all dates that are called vital records. I'm grateful to have found them, but I still have questions. For example, why did George emigrate? The records indicate that afterwards his parents later divorced. For some unknown reason, George wanted a new life. But that's really where the story ends. I found the old census and church records for George. There's no more to be found. None of these people left behind any history of their personal experiences. In the end, the vital records were necessary, but I felt that data was not sufficient. I know that George had several life-altering experiences. They must have brought him feelings of loss, grief, pride, and joy. I know he was affected by local and world events. But beyond the data, what do I really know about him? In hindsight, I realized I was looking for George himself. 10 years ago, remember, I quit looking for George. Then, unexpectedly, my awareness of time shifted. To me, George is the past. He died before I was born, and when he was in the present, he did not know anything about me. To him, at that long time ago, I am an unknown future. Now, I am in the present, facing the future. So what's my story? See, this sermon is not about genealogy or the past. It's about our stories, right here, in the present. Do you have a memorable story, one that you've told to family or friends? What's the most interesting thing that's ever happened to you? For me, it was walking home for miles through the blizzard of 1978. Sarah said, "You should write that down." So I did. Then my daughter Valerie gave me a book entitled, "Dad, I Want to Hear Your Stories." I took it as a hint, and I enjoyed the challenge of learning how to write a story. My stories are only about myself, but they're not an autobiography. I'm an ordinary guy, not a rock star or a celebrity. Nobody really cares what I had for breakfast, so I'm not going to publish a tell-all memoir. However, I'm not without entertaining tales. My stories are short, often one typed page. They sound like the ones you might hear on The Moth or Stories from the Stage. Those stories and mine share one thing. Each story has an aha moment, a moment of discovery or revelation. Someone says something, someone sees something, something happens, or someone ventures to take a risk. The moment is a turning point where the after is not the same as the before. Author Matthew Dix says, "A good story tells of a 5-second moment in a person's life. The purpose of the story is to bring that moment to the greatest clarity possible." The tale of my mother's graduation is an example of a story that has an aha moment. When writing these stories, I pretend I'm speaking to an audience. Later, you may indeed tell a story in public. But like other arts, writing is a personal expression. That means we can share each story or not as we see fit. Either way, you cannot determine the value of the story in the future. That audience is unknown. Besides, when you're sitting in a quiet corner setting pen to paper, there really is no audience. So what then? As I write, I talk to myself, and thus I listen to myself. Writing from personal experience, for me, is an inner reflection. I may only write a few stories a year, but for me, creative writing is a spiritual practice. When you write, and later when you read something you wrote earlier, you are connecting with time as a dimension of the universe. So, if you have a story to tell, put it in writing. Whether it's a story, a journal, a letter, tell it as you lived it. If you don't want it to become prehistory, tuck it away. The future will find it in your attic. And now, please rise as you are willing and able for our closing hymn. Number 1007.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Think small in terms of cups of cocoa and hoodies and soft socks. Imagine that the words you write of hope are as though you are shouting them through a tunnel that goes on for miles of darkness. They will get there, but it will not be today. Have faith. Go in peace.